Good afternoon, and I am now calling to order the meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education meeting for August 5th, 2020. Before we begin, I would just like to, first of all, thank the district staff. Dave, Joan, David, there are others. We've decided to meet in person today, which is, from my vantage point and my understanding, we may be the only sort of school governance body that has chosen to meet in person over the last several months, if not 5-6 months. I did think it was very important to do this, though, for a couple of reasons. Primarily because in this moment where today we're hearing the reopening plan presentation from the district, we just want to make sure we open up as many opportunities for public comment, and that is the main reason that we decided to meet in person. However, it just provided the district staff with a number of challenges, just how to coordinate a remote meeting that is also happening in person, and then how do you live stream it, because we want to make sure people have access in real time, but at the same time we have Zoom participants and we have to record the meeting as well. So we're only starting a few minutes late, but I think for the complications that Dave and other people have had to work through to be able to pull this off, I just really appreciate it. So just from the beginning of the meeting, I want to start with, we're doing something very different here than is happening across the Commonwealth by choosing to meet in person. So I just appreciate your patience as we also get all the technology and everything set up. So thank you. So the first item on the agenda is public comment. We do not have, I believe, anyone signed up for in-person public comment at this time, so we won't have that. We did get 67 emails to the Lawrence Alliance for Education email account. As you know, we've been using that email account as a way for people to submit public comment ahead of the meeting. So what we will do is, I've forwarded already all of those 67 emails to Joan. She's going to get all of those emails out to every member of the LAE. We will also make sure that they get to the district as additional data and feedback, as I believe every single one of them is about the reopening plan. And we will also make them a part of the formal minutes of this meeting so that they'll be available to the public and people can review them as well. So couple of other housekeeping. We do have this meeting, this public meeting, this open meeting of the board, and then we will be going into executive session at the end of this, and we're doing that to consider a couple of contracts, which is one of the reasons that we are allowed to go into executive session. Just to be clear, that the executive session is not to address anything related to the reopening plan or anything that we're discussing in public meeting. It is exclusively to talk about those contract issues that we'll have before the board. We will need to come back and then record the votes taken in executive session in the public meeting as well. The final thing I'd like to say before turning it over to the superintendent and her team is that I sit before you as the interim chair and am very humbled and excited to be able to be here doing that. I would be remiss if I didn't, but just publicly at the beginning, thank our former chair, John Connolly, for the work that he did for well over, I think, 2.5 years, including being here with the formation of the Lawrence Alliance for Education and then steering us over our first 2+ years as a body. So just really want to thank him and acknowledge that. The commissioner is in the process and will eventually appoint a permanent chair, so this interim tag, as far as I know, is real. I'm not sure yet on the timeline, but I know that he's actively working on that, and we'll make sure to get information to all of you as soon as possible. With that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent for the first item on our agenda.
Thank you. So first, we'd like to bring to your attention the calendar. As you may know, the commissioner has granted all districts an additional 10 days for professional development, much needed professional development for staff in preparation for school opening. As a result, we've had to move days in our calendar. So to note is that we're going to bring back teachers on August the 28th. That's the new teachers for Friday, August the 28th. All staff returns on August the 31st, And then the school year ends on June the 22nd. So tonight, we seek a vote to accept the proposed calendar changes. Oh, sorry, excuse me, and a very important note, it's the first day of school for students, which is September the 16th, which accounts for the additional time where teachers will be preparing for opening efforts.
Make a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion? Please.
The purpose is just to approve the calendar similar to what we have done previously, but not necessarily, thank you, Dave, I'm so sorry. But not necessarily, we're not necessarily approving the reopening of schools, except we do have a tentative date on the calendar, but that's not what we're approving here, correct? Superintendent?
Let's see if I understand. So you're asking if you're approving the opening date of the 16th?
On the calendar,
Yeah.
because of the calendar that you want to have in place, but we are not necessarily voting on opening the school on the 16th.
Yes, in fact, you are approving opening school, students returning on the 16th, given the additional 10 days that teachers will be using to prepare for opening.
But I think if I understand the question correct, so we have by state mandate 180 school days. Because of the agreement with the unions and the department, teachers have 10 days additional to plan, which means that we're actually reducing now the number of student days from 180 to 170. But so as far as I understand, Superintendent, the school year will commence for students on September 16th. However, by taking this vote, we're not deciding if reporting to school will be in person, remote,
Correct.
Okay.
hybrid. It just means that the first student school day is September 16th.
Correct.
I just wanted that to be
Yes,
publicly
yes.
That was,
discussed.
yeah, that was
Yes.
my question.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I will, and I will be doing a roll call vote. I know most members are here. We do have one member that's participating remotely, so I will be doing a roll call vote for this. So the motion is to approve the calendar. Jessica Andors,
Yes.
Noemi Custodio-Laura,
Yes.
Member Mariano,
Yes.
Mayor Rivera,
Yes.
Member Silverio,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, so it passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank
ahead.
you. Next, we'd like to share with you highlights of our reopening plan. So last Friday, we shared with you the first draft of our thinking. I'd like to note that this has been a tremendous collaborative effort between the LPS leadership team, who are in person here today, as well as remotely, collaboration between teachers, families, students, our principals, and other important stakeholders. This has been enormous amount of work and thinking. It is our best thinking today, and so we share it with you with that in mind. We are hoping for your thoughtful, as always, and feedback. And then following this presentation and throughout the next 10 days, we're going to be conducting a series of listening and forum sessions for feedback, which I'll share with you in this presentation. So, thank you. So here we share with you that our intent is to bring as many students as safely as possible in terms of in-person, maximizing their needs and supporting them both in the social, emotional, and the academics. Of course, this plan is thinking through health and safety and all of the protocols and guidances that have been given to us. As you may know, the state required for all districts in the Commonwealth to design a plan that has 3 models. First, the full in-person, next, the hybrid model, and lastly, a full remote model. Today, we will summarize the highlights and entertain your questions and concerns and answer those. And then the next time we meet, we hope to get a vote. To build this plan, we asked many stakeholders for feedback, including, of course, our families, and here are the highlights of that survey. The survey was administered last month, and we had around 41% of enrolled students' responses of our families. The respondents represented all of our grades, and 21% of our special education families, students, and 44% of our English learners. Here's the feedback. The question was, to what extent are you concerned about sending your child back to school in the fall? And you can see the results here. The second question was, assuming the continued decline in COVID and specific to Lawrence, which learning option would be most of interest to you? And here are the results. So you can see the highlights here are our families are quite concerned, and then full remote learning from home is the preferred option at this time. When asked about the hybrid model, what model would work best for you? So we gave them a few options. And you see here that with some adjustments, most of our families say that they could make this model work, and then we will break down what a hybrid model looks like. Then we also asked them which of the options you would prefer as a family, and so this is the 2-day in, meaning students would come in 2 full days, and then 3 days would be, yes?
I have Mr. Chair, I have a question that's kind of pressing. I don't know if I should do it now. I know you will probably want to wait to the end, but it's kind of important to the previous slide.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Oh, sure.
Dave's not there. Sorry. Anyhow, I mean, I've been struggling with this conversation, so I just want to make sure I don't lose a point that's important while we're on the slide. Not this one, but the next one. The results?
Forward.
You guys going way too back.
You want to back or forward?
Now go forward, yeah, sorry.
One more.
Yeah, I just don't want to miss the point that although 43% of the people want to do remote learning, if you add a full return and a hybrid together, it's basically split with some type of in-person.
Correct.
That's an important point. So basically split with some type of in-person and 100%.
It is a split. I appreciate you making that point. So if you sum the 16% and 28, that does make it quite the split of families wanting either option. Thank you for that. And so here is the breakdown of that hybrid model, which we were discussing. And so you see that it is also split here, right, in between the 2 days, alternating weeks. And then when we ask the question, none of these would work, you see again a 31%. And so the bottom here you see is that 36% of our respondents do not feel the hybrid model will work, and that 77 would opt for a full remote, 11%, and so those are the add-ups. The next question was about the full remote learning, and would you opt to continue with the remote learning at home? And here are the answers to that. We also asked them, of course, how comfortable are you helping your student learning at home?
Can I just make a comment? Well, sorry, I just don't know whether to keep this on or off. So Ventura, just a point of order. Is it okay for us to make a comment as we go through the presentation, or do you want us to hold comments
Yeah,
till
yeah,
the end?
thank you for that. I would prefer to just get through the presentation. There are only 22 slides, so we're already at 8 through.
Okay.
So let's get through, and then we'll have plenty of time, for public comment. I'm sorry, for comment from board members.
Okay, because I just want to tag this slide as something, there's something I want to point out on this one, so, but keep going, sorry.
Sure, the question is, how comfortable do you feel helping your student at home? And you can see that over 50% of the respondents felt very comfortable. We also asked technology needs. Do you have reliable access to a Chromebook, to a tablet, a computer? We also asked them if they had describes their child's typical internet access. And as a reminder, when we started the closure and with the full support of our mayor, we distributed over 10,000 units. And so here is the results of that, including hotspots. And next, I want to share with you staff survey results. So here's what our staff shared with us. We asked them, which of the aspects concern you the most? And what you see here is returning to in-person instruction at 45%, followed by distancing parameters at 24%. Here's that same question about the hybrid model and staff anticipating a return. So the question is, when you return to school, which model is your preference at this time? So of course, we are following in this reopening plan that it meets all the health and safety requirements as per our DESE guidelines. And the specifics of the plan are really spelled out here, but there are many, many, many. And so these are incredibly important to the actual design of the plan and implementation of the plan. So here is the full in-person model. You will note that in the plan, we drafted that at this time, given the COVID infection rates in our city, family and staff surveys that we just shared with you, of course, our class sizes and the guidelines, we do not anticipate a full return in learning this fall. We'll look ahead, we'll continue to look at metrics, we'll stay in close communication with city officials, health officials, and look at the data, and then later on decide if that's an option for us. In the hybrid model consideration, we do strongly believe that the hybrid learning model is the most feasible given the data and the surveys and for bringing our students back safely into the buildings. But we also know that this can be disruptive. It can be frustrating for both students, families, and staff. And so we have worked to streamline both the hours for students and the staff by grade band. That is in great detail in your plan as well. So here is a sampling of what that continuum would look like in the grades. Of note is that we have planned for our preschoolers and our kindergartens to be in every day, mornings and afternoon sessions, grades 1 through 8, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Friday from 8 to 1 p.m. And then, of course, this is a blend of in-person and remote learning. And then for our high schoolers, every day, a.m., 8:30 to 3:30, and then Wednesdays being the 8:30 and 11 a.m. model with, again, this being in person and a remote learning plan for AM and PM schedules. So this does meet time on learning. Grades 1 to 8 schedules include enrollment options district-wide for enrichment camps and meets the proposed calendar. I should also note that in all of these models, our families and students have the option to do remote learning. For our high needs population in the hybrid model for our English learners and students with disabilities, as well for several other groups of high needs students, including some of our high schoolers, we're ensuring the physical and emotional safety. Here is a sampling of what their schedules would look like. Additional considerations for the remote model is that if we were to revert to a full remote model, we will, I would call it beef it up, it's the best word that I have right now, is to really make a robust model and consider the lessons learned prior to our closure back in the late spring. And so that means that we would have a well-communicated plan, providing our staff with the necessary tool, resources, lots of trainings, ensuring that attendance, grades, and curriculum, achieving aligned curriculum is established. And then in the event that we do this, additional devices would be deployed to our students to ensure access to the devices during the school day. So family preferences for a full remote model. All of our families, as I mentioned, will have that option to enroll in full-time remote model, regardless of what model is implemented and chosen. And this, of course, requires a combination. And if the entire district goes that way, we will be ready also to implement it for every student. We will be also asking families and students to complete an enrollment form, and this form will be available online starting later this week. In terms of our next steps, as I had mentioned, we're going to be hosting virtual feedback sessions. That includes all stakeholders, our families, our students, staff, and various community partners. We're going to be submitting the plan after the vote next week. We anticipate that to be August the 12th. Then we want to launch the Return to School hotline. And we're going to be releasing videos showing our community what back to school will look like in the fall and steps that we're taking along the way to ensure a safe reentry. So here's a listing of those feedback forums. We want to ensure that we hear from all of our staffs. We've made special arrangements for high needs groups, and then we've divided the elementary, high school, middle, and early childhood groups as well. From these sessions, we will be collecting additional data, and we'll be sure to share with you in our next meeting.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the presentation, and also, as you noted, the full plan was sent out to LAE members last Friday and has been posted on the website. So just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to dig into the whole plan and, prepare for this meeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it in alphabetical order of board members and give board members a chance to ask questions. We will do alphabetical order a couple of rounds if we need to be able to make sure that board members are able to address their questions. So I'll start with Jess, board member Andors.
Thank you. So I have a couple of comments and questions. First of all, I want to say thank you for this tremendous effort to gather all of this data. I think it is just super important to have the family input, like that's so obvious, right? And into this particular issue, particularly, although all issues clearly, but so this was great to get all this back. And I guess like a couple of things I do feel like, having read this in depth, that this feels to me like the wisest course through this. And having talked to a bunch of parents over the last several months, I know that there are many people who are extremely concerned, as the survey shows, with having their children come back for health reasons or because they have elderly family members in the house. And And then, you know, a smaller but still significant group that are really worried about, you know, that do need their children to come back because they have work obligations that, you know, are going to make it very difficult for them to have their child at home and still be able to survive economically. So I think this chart's a good course because it allows for in-person, but it gives families the option to be fully remote if they need to. I guess, you know, one of my big comments is that I know that the spring was really hard, and I know that our teachers did a tremendous job pivoting and adjusting to a whole new way of delivering educational curricula and so on. I do feel, and I say this with all love and support for the teachers in our system, but I do have to say that I do feel like we need to beef it up in the fall and in terms of the quality and delivery of content. And I would like to point out on the parent survey that it does say that if you're able to choose to continue with remote learning in the fall, please indicate why. And only 16% of parents chose that because they felt like remote learning was good for their kids. Most of them are saying that because they're concerned about health issues and either their child's health or the health of a family member. And so I just want to hear more about what we're doing to support our teachers in developing and delivering robust content, and also getting trained in like online delivery methods that are engaging so that we can make sure that kids really are learning. Because I think that's the thing that I'm most concerned about, is that I fully understand why, you know, we have to go remote, and many parents are going to choose that, but just already with the challenges we face as a district, there's the potential to fall even farther behind. And I know that's top of mind for all of us, and I just feel like I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And then my one last comment is, and you know, I would welcome any feedback on this differently, but I am also happy to see that there's a more in-person option for special needs students, because we have been hearing a lot from parents of special education students that the at-home learning is particularly challenging, and having, you know, those kids are really benefit from the structure provided by the in-person model. So as long as we can really manage the health and safety aspect of it, I'm very happy that there's a more robust in-person element for that segment of our kids.
Yeah, we think our teachers did a remarkable job under the circumstances of an emergency closure without any guidance, no training at all, just sort of like, here is what you need to do, get it done, almost attitude, and they rallied and they went above and beyond to ensure that they were well connected with their students and that they were able to engage them to the best of their ability given the circumstances. We agree that they need additional support, that they need training, that they need resources, that they need time together to plan. We're very excited about the additional time on the calendar that you all just voted on, to be able to provide that to them with some professional help about what does it look like to really engage students in a remote learning, synchronous, asynchronous model. And so those are the things that we're planning ahead. It will be with them because we have to learn what works for them and where their skills are. We have to differentiate that learning for our staff members. And we're ready to do that. We've been thinking about it, we've been planning for that, and that will be part of what gets nitty-gritty in the bigger plan. What does that professional training look like? How does it get teased out by level? What did the students tell us? What did we learn from it? What were they engaged in most? But that absolutely will be happening. But I think I'm awfully proud of what the teachers did under the short notice and circumstances, and moving forward, it's going to be a more robust model that includes proper training and time for teachers to do some good thinking around that. And you're right, the disruption and challenge for our students with high needs, including our Ls, was just unbelievable, unbelievable. We have many, many students who need enormous amount of structure, and that just simply was not possible during this closure, right? Is why you will see in the model that we have them coming back every single day for that exact reason, because they need additional supports. They need their one-to-one physical therapies, speech pathologists, their occupational therapies, their behavior specialists, right? To be able to redirect all of that learning that didn't happen in the same way for 4 months this spring. So we agree.
So I guess one thing that I would love to see is maybe at the end of the semester, not to like survey us to death, but I would like to understand at the end of the semester, like how parents and families experience the remote learning during this semester, and whether they felt that was effective, and if they have feedback or other things, and teachers as well, right? Because it's going to have to be an ongoing process of professional development during this time. And any information that you can provide us on like sort of what we are training teachers on and what kind of support they're getting would be great to know, so I'd like to see that. I feel like I did not choose the best mask for talking in these situations. I do have two other big questions that I'm sure other people have them too, so I don't want to hog all the time, but one of them is just like, logistically speaking, like I know the AFT and the MTA have both just come out saying that they're opposing a return to in-person teaching, right? So I'd like to understand how that affects this plan. Like, does that trump any will on our part to have a hybrid learning model, or is that something that we negotiate with them, or like it somewhat jives with the survey results, because a lot of staff said they were concerned about the return to in-person learning, but they also said they were prepared to do it, but yet the unions are coming out and saying that we don't want to do it. So I'm finding that a little bit hard to parse, and I would just like to understand what that landscape really means.
Sure, I'm happy to take that. I mean, so I think it's going to be important, and a district, by what's in the data here, has already gotten a lot of information from families, from teachers. I think what I'm understanding from the superintendent is that there will be additional surveys for both families and staff, correct, that'll be going out later this week. I think it is important to obviously continue to dialogue with our unions. It's going to be critical, and it always is and will continue to be. And I think it's important to make sure that we're surveying all of our staff members so we can get a really individualized count of what are people's plans, like what are their individual feelings at the particular moment in time when they're filling out the survey, knowing that it could change, one way or another. So it's a yes and. We're going to continue to engage with our unions, and we're going to survey all of our staff members.
I just want to add that I think in this situation, and actually we went through this with the police officers and the firefighters and the DPW workers, the idea is that this is basically this is their job, to ensure that they're advocating for the best and the most safe situations, their perception of what the most safe situation is for their members, to try to get those things. I don't think it's, as I read through the letters, the MTA letter as well as the AFT letter, that this was like the beginning of a conversation to strike or not to stop work action. At least that's not what the sense I get. But I think this is part of that process of ensuring that we come to this decision that it works in a way that we can provide the services we want to provide. And not to mention, I think DESE is also having conversations with AFT and MTA at the state level,
Right.
which should impact us too.
All right, thank you. We will have another round, so if other questions come up.
Yeah.
So I don't know how informal annoy me. Like, okay.
Let me works. So you took many of my questions. What is okay?
I'll go last next time.
I do have additional questions. These are more granular, and I'm not necessarily looking for an answer, but I just want to know if you guys are planning for that. So one of them is, you have the 3 different plans, and it's very unlikely that we're going to be face-to-face. You have a plan that is hybrid, and the other one is fully remote. Do you have plans in case you need to transition from one to the other one, like on the spot?
Sure, I think that's part of the work ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so in scenario 1, if we start in hybrid
Mm-hmm.
and we have to pivot to remote, we'll be ready.
Okay.
And the other way around, if we start with remote and we have to pivot for hybrid, we'll be ready.
Okay, that's good. Then the other question that I have, and this one is more instruction, delivery of instruction, and because things are going to look very different for kids, and everybody's going to be so excited and hyper because they're going to see all their friends. I'm wondering how distracting will be for the teachers to deliver the instruction while also ensuring that the kids do not behave in a way that is a risk to public health. Is that something that, is that part of the training of the teacher? I'm just trying to figure out if you had so many kids taking the mask and scratching and sneezing just because it's funny, then the teacher is going to spend more time doing that than actually delivering the instruction, which is the reason why we want them back to school.
Yeah, I can imagine our younger learners struggling with initially finding a routine with that. So as an example, I was talking to a mom and the question was like, what if at snack time my daughter shares her goldfish? Because that's what 5-year-olds do. I said, that's an excellent point. And there might be a likelihood that she reaches over to share the goldfish. And so the teacher's going to have to monitor that, right? Although we'll be 6 feet apart. There's a temptation. We're just designed to be with each other. We're designed to share. That's what they teach us in our homes. Culturally, that makes sense to us, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I want a goldfish, a cookie,
Yeah.
whatever that is. And so it is going to take enormous amount of effort on behalf of teachers, which is what I was saying earlier, that, this is not going to be easy for our teachers, and especially our younger learners.
I was thinking about the middle schoolers.
Oh, well,
They were like, you can't make me.
it goes across the levels, but I think developmentally, right, we anticipate that the routines, to establish routines, will be a lot to manage for our
Okay.
younger learners. And students also who have difficulty with a mask on.
Sure.
For whatever reason, right? And so those are the things that is why it's really important that we offer teachers the additional resources, the correct PPE, the supports, and those are the things that we continue to think about and plan for.
And
But
then,
we can't anticipate every scenario,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of
But
course.
we do anticipate that routines will need to be established, and that will take some time.
and then the last 2 questions, one of them is the logistic about transportation, because it's very limited, the amount of students that you can have in a bus. And how, are you guys already planning for that? Again, I'm not saying that you
Sure.
have to give us the details, but are you guys considering that?
Sure, so we are working with our transportation partner, and they have the guidelines that were also issued by the department, and so they are responsible for following that, and we are responsible for helping them
Okay.
and supporting them in following those guidelines. They are an extension of our school, and so we work closely with our partners, our transportation partner, to ensure that they're following the protocol to keep our students safe to and from school.
Okay, my last question, and this cough was allergies, just so you know. So would there be some sort of a training or education for parents for them to recognize if a child has symptoms, so then they will not send the kids to school, and then vice versa, because the teachers will want to make sure that they're also safe? And would there be training for all of the people involved?
I think we're going to continue to follow the CDC and guidelines, local health officials and state official guidelines in terms of determining. We do have nurses and health officials that we're going to be consulting regularly with. And of course, we're going to be in close communication with our families. You know, our teachers are not nurses, our families are not nurses. And so if a student has a cough, it could be allergies, right?
Yeah.
It could be something else, who knows? Kids do get sick
Asthma.
all the, asthma, right, exactly. And we will watch for the list of signs that are very specific to COVID infection, and anything outside of that, we will always consult with our health officials.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Mariano will be next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I've had a real difficult time hearing you guys, and I apologize in advance if I'm repeating anything that was said. But I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I've come up with a few suggestions. And if you bear with me, I'd just like to share some of this stuff with you. The reopening of schools during this time has perplexed the most brilliant minds, and the need to return students and staff safely is a daunting task. With that being said, I want to take a moment to commend the LPS administrative staff, teachers, families, students, and community members who worked in groups to develop the reopening proposal. I think we would all agree that there is no easy answer. However, the bottom line is that maintaining the safety of our teachers and students is and should be our top priority. So with that being said, I believe the district should continue with remote learning until January with some modifications. The first thing that I believe needs to happen, and I think it was addressed in the plan, a family technology assessment needs to be completed. Not through a survey form. I think it needs to be a one-on-one with the family, and to check and see if they're fully prepared to participate in remote learning. Along with that discussion needs to be an emphasis on expectations for attendance, participation, and grading. I mean, each family needs to understand that this is real and this is going to be real school. I was thinking about how that could be completed, and I thought, you know, maybe with the Zoom call to each family, or even in some cases, maybe tents could be placed in the schoolyard, and parents could come in by appointment and meet with staff and then discuss technology and the expectations for their students. When you think about student needs, I think of the students that are in specialized programs. They should be gradually returned for in-person instruction with the appropriate precautions for staff and students. All students, I believe, should have a pre-screening tool before school even begins. Teachers need to know and to individually assess students via Zoom to get some sort of a baseline as to where the students are according to their levels. This data will assist the teachers in lesson planning and identify students in need of small group instruction by intervention specialists. We need to all have a sense of urgency here. We can't afford to let kids go another year without appropriate instruction. And as far as teachers go and staff, each essential staff member needs to feel safe and protected. And the school department has indicated that PPEs will be provided and the schools will be equipped with all the sanitizing and cleaning materials necessary. But when we think of student instruction, and this is the key, teachers are essential. And as essential staff members, again, they need to be protected as they provide instruction for their students. But I believe the instruction should be remote, but teachers should be working remotely from their classrooms. And I'm going to tell you why. To bring children into a classroom where they're separated by 6 feet, they have a teacher with a mask on, they're wearing masks, they can't communicate with their friends, There's no one-on-one instruction with the teacher. There's no small group instruction. Is really setting the kids up for what really isn't school. If teachers are teaching remotely from their classroom, kids will see a classroom, teachers will have materials they need for instruction, and the kids will have that feeling that, yes, this is school and this is real. So I think some consideration needs to be made to think about teachers teaching remotely from their classrooms. A typical day could begin at 8:30 with core instruction taking place in a 4-hour period. And during this time, intervention specialists could use the breakout rooms in Zoom to conduct small group lessons for identified students. The afternoon session from 1 to 2:30 could be enrichment activities taught by support staff. And during the afternoon period, classroom teachers could meet in grade level teams to plan remote lessons for the next day or for the next week. I think we need to make school real for these kids, and I don't think we're ready to bring them back. The hybrid model, especially for the 1 through 8, has students in cohort A and B not seeing their classroom teacher for 6 days. They may see her remotely, but they won't be back in the classroom until 6 days have passed. And that kind of worries me. And I think with remote learning happening from the classroom setting, I think the kids will be more engaged, which the teachers indicated in their survey. They felt that engagement was necessary. And I think it would be a better proposal for the school. So I'll leave it at that. And I thank you for listening and giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts.
Great, thank you, Pat. Mayor Rivera?
Thanks. I guess I would start by saying I think, we are in a place that we've never been before. No one's really ever done this before. The country's never been in this state. So we're all trying to do the best we can to get through this. And I do want to thank the unions and the staff at LPS for the work to put together a plan to try to get where we're going. But I don't think anyone doubts that getting kids learning effectively, we're not arguing whether or not that's important. That is important. I think there's different schools of thoughts about them learning in person and not. And I think that the bar on that is a lot. The soonest we can get them in front of each other, in front of a teacher, is really important. And then a priority for all of us. Unfortunately, stopping the virus is not a priority at the national level, so we have a lot of spread. I think it's been a priority at the state of Massachusetts. It's definitely been a priority here in the city. We were doing masks and mask fines before folks thought it was appropriate. But I don't think that we can get away from this piece of really figuring this thing out. But in the end, what we're going to find is that there are just a bunch of bad options. Everyone's going to be upset about one thing, concerned about another thing, but I don't think that standing still is an option. I do have questions about the document. I'm going to go through them in a second, but I want to just set this overarching piece that we do have to figure out a way to get kids learning and learning in person. And if it means 2 days out of 7, it's better than no days out of 7. Because the reality is that we live in this imperfect world where the training that we have is not enough, the funding we have is not enough, the facilities we have are imperfect, the safety net that people live out in the world is imperfect, the funding for schools is imperfect, the economy and the jobs that our families have are imperfect. So we have this great imperfect situation to have to work out of. But I think that that's part of the resiliency of our society, that we can do these things and try to push forward in the right direction in a positive way. So I have some questions about the document, and then I'll just stop talking. This talks a lot about the pre-K group, the kindergarten group, and transportation for those. I'm just concerned about what that transportation looks like. Is it mostly parents taking their kids? Is it public transportation? Is it the school providing transportation? It talks about it in the executive summary about pre-K, trying to get those kids to school. And I just don't know how much of that really is, are parents taking their kids to school, pre-K and K? Especially since there's gonna be this dual model, AM, PM.
You're waiting for an answer to that
Yeah,
question.
should I
Oh,
not?
thank you. I was
Should I
just,
not?
I didn't know if you were going to go through a bunch of questions, so I saw you pausing, and you said you had a few questions. Yes, so in this model, we will be transporting students. We will be surveying our families to see who will be taking that as an option, but we are ready to transport students in this model.
What does PM mean at the high school? What's the afternoon time frame for the high school?
I'm going to have my colleagues jump in here. I think there's a mic over there, and they can give you the breakdown of that model as well.
The PM is 1:30 to 3:30.
So I show up to school at 1:30, and I go to 3:30.
Yeah, 12:30 to 3:30.
Okay.
Your question was
Yeah, what was the PM?
What's the PM time frame?
12:30 to 3:30.
All right, great.
So
So I
students.
show up at 12:30 and I stay till 3:30?
Yep.
Okay. But for the high school, it's 4 days.
Correct. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
With Wednesday remote learning at home.
Great. There is a chart that I don't really understand. The school student capacity percentage versus the number of schools. Does that mean that there are 9 schools that meet 39 to 59% capacity? I don't know if anybody has it out.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
So we have 13 schools that can, and meet the guidelines. If you have 13 schools that can meet the guidelines, 6 feet distancing, at 80% to 100% of the guidelines.
At 80% to 100% of the student capacity.
The student capacity, yeah. Of the DESI guidelines,
Yes.
okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
how
correct.
I-
That's correct.
Yeah. And so 13 schools can meet 80 to 100% of student capacity that DESI requires. 10% of the schools, 60 to 79%.
10 schools.
10 schools, I'm sorry. You're right. 9 schools, less, 39 to 59% of the district. That's what that chart is saying.
Yes.
Do we have a punch list of facility items that we think that if we go hybrid, we have to absolutely fix?
I'm going to let my colleague jump in here. I'm sure his punch list is quite large.
Good evening. Mayor, yes, we have been working on a really large punch list. We work in partnership with the DPW. DPW has been fixing many of our plumbing issues in our schools, which would be our hand washing. And also, they are currently working on rooftop units and ventilators and HVAC in many of the schools. There is a large list, but they are tackling it each day, and we're making great progress, but the work continues.
That's good to know, because it's not a static shot, like, because teachers went away and they had problems in their schools, but you've been working this whole time
The
to
whole
fix
time.
schools and prepare them for return, correct?
That's correct.
Because I know there's 2 big things they talk about, and one of them is air circulation, and the other one is hot water and access to the ability to be sanitized.
Yes. So an example, in this auditorium, we have Purell stations, hand sanitize stations on the walls. We have posters up. We have arrows on our staircases coming up and down. As far as hot water, I believe hot water is not included in the CDC guidelines. That could change, long that it's running water, with proper soap and paper towels.
But that's a thing that's actually, I've been to some bathrooms where there's water and maybe even soap, but maybe not paper towels. Or paper towels and water, but not soap. But that's one of the things you guys will address.
We continue working on that and looking at that.
And I'm going to skip over the air flow thing, because I think that is a facilities problem that I don't think anybody in the Commonwealth is going to be able to meet, that all schools have a specific type of, yeah, and I don't want to think that I'm being smart, and I don't want to be fresh, like, it's not that they're asking for a hospital level filtration system, but, these are old schools, so some of those problems are going to have to be mitigated by window openings or fans and some blow units and things like that. So I'm not going to ask a question about that, because I think that's way too complicated. All right.
Can I piggyback on one of your questions, or you're
Can I
giving
get-
me the
can I
evil
get through my-
eye? Yeah, I think you're get through yours.
I'm just trying to,
If
I
you
don't
can
want to say, Julia's next, and so I'm trying to get through my thing. I don't want to get mad at me.
Sorry.
It's all right, take your time.
Can we just talk about the number of kids in some of these sessions that you projected? Let's say everybody agrees. I'm glad we're wearing masks so nobody can see each other smiling weirdly. Let's say everybody agrees we're going to go hybrid. And what's the cohort numbers look like for a school system of 15,000, almost 15,000 kids? On a Monday when I go into the Oliver, or Monday when I go into the Leonard, how many kids are we talking about?
Yeah, again, based on classroom size and that chart that you were referring to, you may have anywhere between 10 to 12 students in one classroom and up to 16 students in a classroom. And so let's say the school has 300 kids, you can do the math, we have about, you can do the math, and so that's what happens with that many students in any given school. But it varies, as you know, and so what the facilities team did, along with our school-based staff, is they went classroom by classroom. We have an average, we tested, we call it pressure testing as a feasibility test, to see when you put those desks at that distance, how many desks can you comfortably put in? Removing any additional items, ensuring there's still a desk for the teacher and a chair, like nothing else, bare walls, just those desks. So it really depends on the size of the classroom, because as you know, our buildings have different ages and different compositions.
A classroom in this building was made in a modern format.
Correct.
It's bigger than the classroom at the Oliver, which was, close to a Civil War building.
Or the Leahy, or the Tarbucks.
And just for the record,
Yes.
we have more of those than we have of these.
Jump in, yes.
Double desks, which will take into consideration also. When we get to our preschool levels, a lot of them have kidney-shaped tables where social distancing, you're talking about one child possibly at a desk. It's very challenging, but, so it depends on the furniture, many different factors, room shapes, et cetera.
So given the numbers we're talking about, given the spaces we're talking about, what's the experience for a teacher in a cohort? What's my week look like?
So, picture this. You are a third grade teacher, and now you have 11 students in front of you as 6 feet apart. And just the bare bone materials. You have your manipulatives, you have your read aloud materials, anything else that you deem necessary to teach for the next 3 hours. You will do the direct instruction, small group instruction. You will take a mask break, a snack break, a physical body break as you would in any traditional day. And then you are doing a lot of hand washing, lots of hand washing throughout the day. Reminders about not putting your hands on your face, reminders about not sharing that snack or that pencil or that material with your peer, and keeping safe distancing when you go to the bathroom. I gotta go to the bathroom, okay, let's sign out here. I gotta make sure that, Daniel Rivera is now leaving my room. I gotta make
I
sure
used
that.
to never come back. It's a
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. I got to keep track of Daniel Rivera returning to my room, right? Because now the teacher's also responsible. It's a huge, enormous responsibility on teachers to ensure that not only are their students safe, but that they're learning and that they're engaged and that they're happy. They're kids after all. They're third graders and younger students and older students.
And I do that from, if I'm at grade school, I do that all day, and then the next day, there's another group of kids that are different.
Well, it's not the whole day, so it's a modified schedule. If you look, we do have sample schedules, so it's
8
not
to
a,
1.
sure, it's not a traditional, let's say, 8 to 3:30 schedule, so it's a bit modified. And yes, you do have a second cohort of students. So you saw the first 11 the first 2 days, and then you see the other half of your students afterwards. Yes, that is correct.
You see the same kids Monday and Tuesday, and then a different set of kids Thursday and Friday.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And for the high school, it's similar, except that
And
they're-
for the high schools, it's a little different because cohort A all goes in the morning, I'm making the A piece up, and then cohort B all in the afternoon. So that is consistent for the high schoolers.
and teachers are moving and not kids
Correct.
at the high school.
Yes, to minimize, again, exposures.
So again, all the teachers come back in this model. That's a different question. So when am I doing this virtually? Am I always doing this virtually? Am I always on the camera?
That's a great question. So the entire model for the district has Wednesdays as remote. And throughout the week, there's also pieces of remote.
To address the kids who are not sitting in the classroom?
Correct. Correct.
And now to the question, does this plan have to add teachers?
At this time, we do not foresee adding it. We always need additional supports for small group instruction. And so we're going to be relying heavily on the current staff to support. We would like to add, and this is part of the SOA planning that we spoke to you back in the winter, additional social emotional support, staff members, enrichment, all the other things that we are pretty lean on. But this relies on the current staff that we have.
There's a group of students that are, in the report, they're called high needs population. I think I did the math right. Is that around 1,700, 1,800 students? It's,
It's-
because it looks like it's 94 independent learners, 74 practical academy ones, medical support, 24. Am I adding that stuff up right, or am I not?
Percentage-wise, it's over 20% for students with special learning needs and over 35% English learners. So I know the percentages, the numbers could add up to be
And there's some
that
crossover
number.
percentages.
Go ahead, Kenan.
Some of those numbers are set, so your students who are in ILP, they're dictated by IEPs, so those numbers won't fluctuate a lot. Something like the students who are in foster care or homeless, or newcomer English learners, those numbers fluctuate over the course of the year. So those are not as precise as the substantially separate special education programs, if that makes sense. But you're adding them correctly, just that they're not set in stone.
But that seems incredibly small. Am I wrong on that? I mean, because if ELLs make up such a big number of our students, then they should be a bigger part of the 4-day cohort, no?
Yeah, so what you're seeing here in the high needs, so you see the grades 3 through 8, really 3 through 12, newcomer English learner. That's not all English learners. Learners make up about 40% of our district. They're around 5,000. So you can't prioritize in-person learning for 40% of the district because there's everyone who goes in person. So the committee identified the newcomer English learners to prioritize for in-person learning. But as Cynthia was saying earlier, when schools actually kind of make the schedules and based on the capacity in the classroom, the number of students who are able to attend for the 4 in-person days could increase. And similar to special education, this is not all special education students. These are students who are receive special education services 60% or more of the time. So students who are in full inclusion or partial inclusion are also not included in this priority for in-person services.
And this is a place where I like to just put a pin in for what Jess was talking about, the training. Like, what does that curriculum look like online for an English language learner, you know, that has to navigate Zoom in English or Facebook in English and all that stuff? So that is, I'm really interested in that because there's such a high group of them and because we're not bringing them in 4 days. That's, if I can get a little bit more information about what that training looks like for the teachers and what it's experience going to look like for the kids.
Yeah, of course, and that's why specifically students who are at a level 1 or 2, so those are like social instructional, just newly arrived to the country, those are the students who are prioritized for that in-person learning. Once you get to a level 3 English language proficiency, that's more academic language. That's kind of the differentiation, that we are absolutely prioritizing students who would struggle with social instructional language or logging into Zoom for the 4 days of in-person learning. But we also have additional training planned to support all English learners and all students. 80% of our district spoke a language other than English as a first language, so it's supporting all students, absolutely.
Can you talk to us about how they will eat? Why is everybody looking at me about that?
I'm going to have Anne Marie jump in here with,
contrary to popular belief, not a subject very close to my heart.
Hi, how are you all? You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So we are going to be doing a grab-and-go breakfast in the morning, which is what we already do in our schools anyway. They'll be at different points in the school. The desks are going to be 6 feet apart. The kids will be able to take off their mask while they eat. We are working on putting additional barrels along with strainers on those barrels. You've probably seen them at the Leahy School in their cafeterias, so that it catches the milk and things like that to keep the trash down in terms of when students don't finish all of their milk. With regards to lunch, we are playing with a few different mechanisms. We're looking at potentially having kids take meals home with them, and we're looking at having kids eat in the classroom. So we are doing the similar thing to a breakfast, where they'll be boxed, what we call grab-and-go meals, and they will be going to the classroom. We could be doing them as they take them home. I will tell you that the guidelines do say that kids are not allowed to eat on the buses, so that'll be a bit of a challenge because they're going to have their food, and we're going to have them get on buses. So the part of the transportation is looking at monitors for all those buses, because you can't ask the bus driver to watch the kids and monitor and drive the bus. So we're looking at a few different options. It's not completely cast in stone yet, but we know that there are some challenges with food, but we also know that it is incredibly important to our students. So we want to make sure it happens every day and that we're doing 2 meals a day.
Yeah, I mean, when you have 100% free lunch population, the food that they get at school is very important. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarification on that, though? So you're saying that if they don't have an opportunity to eat in school, right, it's basically they're gonna eat something at 8 when they get the grab-and-go breakfast, and then they'll get a to-go lunch at 1, So maybe this is a very first world problem, but that's 5 hours that they're going to be in between meals. And, I mean, I'm just thinking of my son and maybe, I
Who's a
don't,
stu-
I mean,
who's a student?
like, his learning at the
High
fourth
school
hour.
Who's a student in the district?
Hours.
Yeah,
We're talking about the high school where it's not 5 hours.
okay, but it, like, at the 1 to 8 level, or,
At the 1 to 8 level, we're planning on feeding them in the classroom.
okay, all right, gotcha, thank you.
I'm just letting you know that there's a lot of options on the table.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that we are absolutely going to be doing these options and then tweaking them where needed, because it's going to take us a couple days to get this right. And it's really important that people know that just because we don't get it right on day 1, we'll do a better job on day 2, and by day 10, we'll have it down pat.
Yeah, I just think the little ones need to be able to eat sooner than 5 hours apart.
Absolutely, but you have kindergarten kids who are only in for 2 hours, you have high school kids who are in for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a couple different methods to make this work appropriately for all of them.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
I think that's a really important point, that this is all going to be, no one's going to put a plan together that's going to hit a home run on day 1 every day, and we have to be patient with that. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Different question. Can you talk to me about face coverings and masks? What's it look like for K through 12, K and pre-K, 1 through 8, and the high school?
Yeah, I'm going to have Nancy jump in.
Is she on the screen?
No, she can hear us. Oh,
I
great.
didn't hear the question.
Thanks, Nancy. The question is about face coverings and what that would look like across the district for students.
The DESE guidance says that they'll be brought from home as long as it's a cloth face covering and doesn't have any, pictures or derogatory things on it. Then the face coverings from home are fine. We do have additional emergency face coverings for students or staff who the face coverings get soiled or dirty or they forget them at home.
Nancy, who wears them and when? Can you tell me the difference between K and pre-K, 1 through 8, 1 through 8, and then at the high school?
The guidance says anyone second grade above, the face masks are mandatory. Below that, they're strongly recommended.
And what do we do if parents don't want their kids to wear face masks?
I didn't hear that.
What do we do if parents don't want their kids to wear face masks?
That's something that's going to have to be written into the guidance. Unless they have a medical reason why, according to the guidance, they have to have a face mask on. Unless it's, medically unnecessary or they can't wear a face mask.
Okay. I think this hits as much of the logistical needs of a plan for putting kids in classrooms under this crazy COVID-19 environment. I've tried to get information about, transmission and all that stuff, and I'm not a doctor. I'm a marketing guy, so I don't know what in the end those things are. But it seems that the conversation CDC is having is about transmissions in schools. That the biggest real quick question is, how do you keep adults from getting it to other adults? No one really knows the long-term effects on kids, but the kids are getting sick the way we're getting sick, and they're not carrying it the way we carry it, except in high schools. And I think the plan addresses those things. I will say, I think the plan could use, a section about testing, whether or not we would, even though I think we can afford it, but are we going to do testing? I think pool testing might be appropriate, and we'd have to just go track down the money for it. I think it should have a budget around, how much this extra stuff, how much the punch list costs, how much the PPE costs, how much added staff is needed. Because I think if you're going to do extra classroom time and you need extra teachers, I think we need to be honest about that, and then the state needs to pay for that. If they're asking us to go back to school, and if we decide that we need to go back to school even part-time, even hybrid, then we need to come up with the money. But the money is an important part. I think a budget is a roadmap about what we're trying to do. And I think a missing piece too, and it talks a little bit about outdoor space, but we can definitely create outdoor spaces with tents and things of that nature. We have, not every school has a big schoolyard, but, you know, using outdoor spaces, and I think in a way you can mitigate, even get to more space and more in time. Those are all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm technically next in order just by last name, but I'm going to defer to Julia, and then I'll ask questions at the end.
You could go if you wanted to, Ventura, but
I'm good, thank you.
the mayor had a lot of great questions that I think a lot of people are probably concerned about, and I think we deviated from the actual presentation that was made to us here tonight in terms of the survey that was done. And I am really pleased that I saw so many parents and stakeholders and teachers outside concerned about this meeting, and I really want to thank them for taking the time and coming out today and providing their support with their signs and their presence, because that's one of the things that a lot of times we are concerned about as to whether the parents are as involved as we expect them to be. I have a couple of questions, again, going back to the survey that was presented to us tonight and the percentages. I'm really, and I want to also thank the staff and the district for all of the work that you guys have been doing during this crazy year that we're in, because this hasn't been an easy time for any of us. Not for the teachers, not for the superintendent, not for the children. So there is a lot of work ahead of us, because I don't think this is going to disappear anytime soon. And we all have concerns, and I think we're going to have to try this one day at a time and see how things go, and move on and see what works and what doesn't. But on slide number 5, I don't know if we can go back to the survey questions here, where the number of respondents. I'm looking at the number of English learners that responded to this survey, where in the past we have been told that we have a significant amount of issues contacting those families. So I'm really, curious to find out how come we have such a high number of respondents for the English learners portion, if anybody could answer that.
I just want to clarify that it's 44% of respondents self-identified that their students were English learners, and 21% of the respondents identified that their students were received special education services. So I think that perhaps parents could be identifying that their student is an English learner and it's not technically an ESL service, receiving ESL services. I also think that the high percentage of response, I hope, is maybe due to our new LPAC, English Learner Parent Advisory Council, that is supported by one of our teachers at the high school. They've been meeting regularly, specifically about reopening, and I know that group of about 60 parents has been pushing the survey out to the community. So I can't say that for certain, but I hope that played a role. And the reason that it's important is because these are representative of our population. So of our entire population, we're around 20% special education and a little lower than that for English learners.
So do we have a category for anybody that is not an English learner or a special education?
Yep, so the survey asked the parent, the person completing the survey, does your student receive special education services? They clicked yes or no, and is your student an English learner? And they clicked yes or no.
So if a child is born here in the United States, it goes to school, and their surname is Silverio or Garcia, others, they're immediately identified as an English learner?
No, there's a very intensive intake assessment process. It starts with the home language survey, which parents complete when they enroll in Lawrence Public Schools. If they indicate a language other than English is spoken in the home, the student then receives an intake assessment by an ESL licensed teacher. Once the intake assessment is completed, a team meets about that specific student and looks at other data. So even if the intake assessment technically qualifies them, they talk to the parents, they look at other data, and the team makes a decision and notifies the parent. And then the parent can also opt out of those services.
So my concern is we only have 2 categories. Should we have 3?
Sorry, so a parent could have gone through the whole survey and say, no, my student does not receive special education services, and no, my student is not an English learner. So that's the remainder of the respondents.
But there is not a number for that, a percentage for those, for that third category here.
Right, sorry, maybe I'm not, so 21% of the responses.
Special
they
ed.
clicked.
And
No, it's
44
not
English.
that 21 were just special education. Of the 5,800 responses, 21% said that their student was in special education. There could be a family that clicked both of those, so they're not mutually exclusive. So but there's many families who didn't select either of those options.
I'm still confused, but maybe we can discuss it a little bit further in terms of that. So 65% responded of the 5,800, is that what we're saying?
We can't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand it, because if anybody else asks me, I can't answer the question.
Julia, so we have 5,800 responses.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a parent answering that survey and I'm being asked, does my child receive special education services for my children, I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And is my child an English learner? I would say no. Now, I would also fill this out again for my second child,
Mm-hmm.
because we asked them to fill it out for each of their children. So 21% of those that responded identified one of their children, one or more of their children, receiving special education services.
So 21% of the 5,800?
Yes.
Correct.
Right, I got that.
Okay.
And then 44% of the 5,800?
Correct.
44% of the 5,800 responded that their children receive English learner services.
So, but my question, and I don't know if what's confusing about it is that where are the other children that are either not an English learner or a special ed? Where's the other percentage?
Not mutually exclusive. So you can have a child who receives special education services and English learners. So I think what you're asking is that 79% of families did not identify their child as having special education services, and 66% of the respondents did not identify their student as an English
I see
learner.
there are, okay, thank you. But I'm still concerned about the number we know that this district has primarily a lot of English learners, but that those were the highest numbers in responding to this survey. And also looking at the family feedback and the teachers' feedback, I'm very concerned about the number of families and teachers that are concerned about the children. The percentages are pretty high about the children going back to in-person education. I mean, I know that we're trying to address all of those concerns and some of the questions that the mayor asked and some of the recommendations that were made by Pat and are taking into consideration these concerns. And I know that it's not going to be easy, but I'm just trying to bring this out to that it is a high number of people that are basically against sending their children back to school in person based on these. I'm looking at slide number 7, I think, 6, 5 or 6, 5. Another question that I have is, when we started this process of remote learning, we talked about the concerns that the district had, first of all, about the number of children that did not have devices in their homes, and that every child, or that was my understanding, was provided with some type of a device so that they could learn from home or take their classes from home. But I'm looking at this where it says that that there are still students sharing devices with other students?
See, that's correct. So as a reminder, what we did back in March was deploy 10,000 units that we had in stock, our inventory, which put us at deploying one per family at the time. We also talked about families who have multiple students, and for that, we tried to deploy additional units. Since, and with the generosity of the mayor, we replenished the entire stock, so those units are back in the schoolhouse, and the guidance to school leaders and staff is like, once students get back, make use of that to deploy units to those students who do not have, in particular for those families who have more than one student. But you are correct, at the time of closure, we didn't have enough units for every single student. We have nearly 14,000 students. We didn't have 14,000 units.
But should we end up teaching remotely again, we will have enough for each
We do have them.
student?
We do have them now. In addition, we also have requested the support of the mayor to distribute one-to-one devices for the high schoolers. We think that's incredibly important in this model, and that's also in the works.
And those devices are still owned by the school district, not necessarily given to the students, or is it just for the?
The current inventory that we deployed are a gift. They were not new. They were in good shape, we would say. And as you can imagine, some have fallen, some have gotten wet, some have no longer worked, some have gotten repaired, but they were a gift from the city, the mayor, to our families.
So what will happen come, not this upcoming school year, but let's say the next school year where you have an influx of new students? Is the school district in a position to continue to provide these devices, or is it going to be a requirement that the students have their own devices?
We are prepared to supply devices to our students.
And just to follow up on that point, we made a commitment to make sure that that's the case too, if there's needed more resources. We do get support from the Federal CARES Act, as well as the state COVID-19 money, as well as stuff from the city's reserves. So in the end, I'd say we spent the citizens' money to do it. So thank you to the taxpayers.
Thank you, May. One of the questions that, one of the comments and discussions that came up previously was the fact that the students were not engaging as we expected them to do by being remotely taught. And now, based on this conversation that we're having tonight, I'm hearing, oh, the students are doing well. And I'm just concerned as to how this could have changed from one time to another. How can we assess that the students did not do so well during the last time by being taught remotely, but come this school year, they're going to be fine?
I think what we learned from staff and families and students is that engagement was challenging. I think that teachers would agree that they need additional support, and we're going to be providing that. That's sort of at the top of the list when we surveyed teachers. What is it that would make you feel more comfortable moving forward? And they identified that student engagement at the top of the list. Students have also shared that with us, our older students, and our families have as well. It's really hard to engage a kindergartner over a Zoom, and we talked about Dojo and all these other tools, right? It's really, really hard. And so that will continue to be a priority in terms of good training, resources, and the expectation that this is real school, right? That this is not going to be like, you're on some, you're maybe, you know, it'll be very different. So yes, that will be a priority for us.
So that continues to be a challenge. It will be a priority, but continues to be a challenge.
Well, right now, we just finished summer school, right? So that's sort of ended for us. And moving forward, it's a priority in terms of helping teachers with students and family how to better engage our students.
So was the summer school period a good time to evaluate, if you will?
Yeah, the summer school was kind of dreamy because it's such small groups, right? And so it's a little bit of a different comparison than it was when the larger classrooms, Julia. So we tested a few things, but it was a little more condensed and smaller, right? But I think moving forward, it's really about working with the teachers, with the families and students to get that to be more robust and to feel more accountable and to have really clear expectations.
That sounds good. I'm just bringing these up because I know these were discussions that we previously had, and I know that these are concerns some of the parents have, you know, that might not be at some of these presentations. There was one. Just have a couple of more comments regarding this. Excuse me. Are we prepared for the challenges that we could be faced if there is an outbreak upon the children coming into school today and tomorrow, having a situation similar to what has happened in other school districts? How are we prepared to handle that, and also the effect that this could have on the families that send their children to school?
So in the scenario that we are in person and there is an identified case, we will follow protocols as per both city, DESI, and CDC guidelines. And that is an extensive protocol to follow. I can have Nancy jump in here to sort of give us the highlights of that, but there's very clear protocols for what to do in the event of an infection and a positive case.
You're mentioning an infection of, let's say, one case, two cases. I'm saying if there's a significant.
Oh, I see your question. Oh, yeah, I think that would call for bigger forces beyond me, and so that's back to the commissioner, that's back to our city officials. In that case, I think it's beyond my pay grade, it's beyond my expertise.
But that should be something that we need to have
Absolutely.
as part of this whole plan.
It's absolutely why we have to be in very good communication with each other, because that's a possibility, and so together we would have to figure that out. What does that mean if there's another surge during our school opening?
Should there be, has any thought been given in terms of hybrid teaching to dividing the school population into half? And I know this is a real tough situation to even consider, but having half of the school population come in for half of the year and the other half the rest of the school year. And the reason I say this, I know it's very difficult and I know everybody's dealing with this, is because I think it's more challenging to have children come in and associate one another, one today and the other group tomorrow, rather than separating and having the same consistent group work together. And it's not listed here, it's just something that I want to throw out there because I'm sure you guys have discussed this. Am I making any sense in terms of what I'm saying?
Sure, yes.
Because you're grouping the kids, and they're all going at the same time, and coming and going at the same
Sure.
time.
The task force committees did not consider that scenario.
And I know that that's a very difficult one to consider, if at all, but it's just something that came to mind. And lastly, my last question on this is as a school district, what power do we have as a school district, as a board, as a city, to deviate from any of DESI's or the state governance, if we found that we had a better plan that we thought worked for our community than the state has mandated or that DESI has?
Go ahead.
What authority do we
Yeah,
have,
I mean,
if
I
any?
think- Sure. I think what I would say is that all of what's coming from DESI is sort of further guidance building on the governor's orders. We are required to build a plan based on this guidance, which includes current health guidance and other things. So we're not being mandated. So as a LAE board, as a district, it's our responsibility to work with city officials and our district to come up with our district's plan that aligns to the guidance. So we don't actually have, from the state level, a plan that's, sort of being given to us. All we have to do is come up with 3 models: in-person, fully, hybrid, or remote, but we have to build it. And that's why every community is engaging in these kind of conversations around what's going to work for our students, our staff, our families. But there isn't, again, like a mandated model we have to follow.
Okay, so that is something that we can still develop on our own with the concern, of course, of DESI and the governor to be able to implement if we came up with a plan that could work for us based on our populations and demographics that we have. I'm just throwing that out there. That is not, that we don't have to follow 100%. If the state says this is how you're going to do it, this is how you're going to do it. We have a little bit of autonomy on that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there are public health sort of orders and guidance that, and laws that we can't. Like so for example, the requirement for a student, went from 180 days to 170. We can't deviate from 170, but we can decide how we're going to meet those 170 as an example. There's some of the health guidance. We're in here right now, less than 25 people with masks because that's an order from the governor. So we do have to work within some of those orders and laws, but how we do it is very much at our discretion.
Okay, I understand
but-
that. Thank you so much.
But Mr. Chair, can you just stick on this point? Because I want to just be clear and honest about this. We're not a local school board.
No, we're not.
And so that the commissioner could intervene is very likely, just to be clear about it. I don't want people to think that we are like the school board in North Andover made a decision, the school board in Somerville didn't make a decision. They have to do what they have to, they can't buck the DESI guidelines, but they can decide to do things that, in some cases, if we decided to do something that the commissioner didn't think was appropriate for our school district, because we were in receivership, he can override this board.
That's understandable.
I want to put that
Thank
into
you-
play.
Thank you for clarifying
Thank you for
that.
clarifying, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, because that was my whole point, that we really don't, basically. But, guys, I don't envy your positions during this time. You have a lot on your hands, so do we, in terms of being overseers, but there's a lot of work, and there are a lot of challenges ahead of all of us, and let's see the best we can do to make this work, and let's hope that both parents, teachers, stakeholders, everybody is on board to make this work, and to at least try out some of the different options to see what will work and what won't, because we do have to go back to some type of normalcy, especially for the children. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll now take a few minutes to ask some questions. So, just as many people have said, but I want to reiterate just the tremendous amount of work from district staff, to build this document every single day. And again, I started the meeting by acknowledging, all the work, even for this meeting right now. So this is something that evolves every single day. Working at the department, I can say this, we're putting a lot of guidance out, but it's a lot of guidance that then you all have to sift through and make sense out of. So there's a lot of information that's coming to you all who are directly working with our students and in our schools. And so, I know that these conversations are happening in every single district in the Commonwealth, and no one has, as the mayor said, the perfect answer, but everyone's really wrestling with all the information we have, we know, the guidance, and then what's in the best interest of our students, our staff, our families, and there's no right answer. And so I really appreciate just all of the work. I do have a few just follow-up questions and clarifications. So number one is, if you could just explain a little bit more about what the ongoing engagement it looks like. And I know you mentioned superintendent surveys going out for students and staff. Can you just talk a little bit more about like what information are those surveys trying to capture? And then also what are the meetings that were spelled out in the presentation happening? I think the coffee houses or, coffee hours with families.
Yes, sure. So the upcoming meetings are an opportunity for us to do a lot more listening and get reactions and feedbacks and questions, comments on the plan. We want to make sure that we are refining our thinking, make sure that all stakeholders have had an opportunity to get their perspective. We want to make sure that the big highlights of this is something that people can wrap their heads around, just similar to questions that you all have raised. And then with respect to the upcoming surveys, there's a couple of them that are of importance. One is back to staff members. So now that we've shared with them our best thinking of this plan, where do they see themselves in terms of returning in terms of this plan? And the same with their families. Are they choosing one model versus the other one? For many reasons. And so that's going to be happening in the upcoming days. We hope to bring that data back to you all, including all the forums for our next meeting. So they're really just more opportunities to have conversations with the stakeholders.
But again, so I'm understanding, the surveys are specifically asking staff and families, like, what are you thinking for the fall?
Correct.
Based on these models.
Correct.
Okay. Which again, I don't have to tell you all, but is critical data for you all, just in your planning. And so I think whatever we can do as a board to help you to make sure we're reaching, the goal should be 100%. I mean, that's kind of what we want, but I mean, I know it's going to be challenging, but whatever we can do, because that data and as accurate of data that you can have is just going to be, as you know, just really helpful, because these are all models, but once you have information around what our families, staff, students want to do, like, obviously that'll just help with your planning more. So I'd say please let us know if there's anything we can do.
Thank you.
Even, there's the meeting next week, but then even beyond that, like, we still need to collect that information, and in an ideal world, like, we're getting something from everyone. Superintendent, can you talk a little bit about, well, actually, let me not go there first. Let me go here. So with the remote learning, this is a part of the plan that is, if I'm understanding correctly, there's some framework, and sort of lessons learned at a high level, I think, from what happened in the spring, but that a lot of the details of what remote learning will look like, whether you're 100% remote and you choose that as a family, or in our hybrid model, 2-3 days a week, you might be remote. My understanding is that a lot has to be fleshed out and finalized with the teachers. That's what I understood from your comments, which I agree with on the one hand, because they're the teachers and they know instruction, they know our kids. On the other hand, it makes me really concerned that, we have 10 days with teachers at the beginning of the school year, only 10 days with teachers at the beginning of the school year. And I guess I'd like to maybe better understand, like, without eliminating the critical role of teachers that they have to play in those 10 days, what are you all planning to do, or, sort of thinking about doing, such that when those 10 days arrive, we're using their expertise in very targeted ways? But I guess and you're not saying this, but I guess what terrifies me is thinking that we would start, like, really developing a remote learning model or plan at the start of those 10 days, which is not what you're saying.
No,
but
not at
that's
all.
That's what would keep me
No,
up
not
at
at
night,
all,
you know?
not at all.
So if you could just talk a little bit about like
Sure,
what's
sure.
happening now, what will you all be doing?
Sure. So in the interim and until we meet with teachers, what's going to be happening are the structures and systems so that then the teachers can fill in the nitty-gritty of curriculum and lesson planning, right? And so as an example, a platform that we all adopt. I think this is back to Julia's question and questions that you all had early this summer. How do you keep track of attendance, right? What is the universal platform or something that we're going to adopt across the system? That's an example. Another example will be a schedule that we develop that is consistent across the district for across the levels, or we make nuances depending on younger students, older students. But that will be consistent, right? So if you are whoever stakeholder group, you're like, well, what's Lawrence doing during remote learning? What is happening at 9 o'clock? What's happening at 2 o'clock? And everybody has an idea of what's happening during those periods. So those are examples that we're going to give very good guidance and the leadership team. And then the fill-in is the smaller nuances of like, if between 9 and 10 you're doing math, that's teacher work with school-based teams, right? So you're absolutely right. We're not saying the teachers are going to develop the whole remote plan. They're going to fill in the gaps of the nuances of the lesson planning and schedule once we give them the big frame of it.
No, thank you, that's helpful, and again, I prefaced it, but I know that's not what you were saying, but that's just to clarify for folks. And I think it's important to have some of those systems, obviously it's critical to have the systems in place, the expectations around attendance and grading, and, all those things that we have a little bit more time now to plan out than when this hit right away, because we were all just, I think just trying to do our best. With that remote learning, I guess I'm wondering also, like the state has recently partnered or put out the opportunity for districts to partner with some like virtual schools, to access courses if needed and things like that. And I'm wondering if that's something that either you all have already considered or might consider, just as an example of, especially for students who have to go fully remote. One of my fears is that, it's hard to be a teacher, period. Like, and I taught for 9 years at the high school and middle school level. And as a first-year teacher, it's challenging to be able to come up with your curriculum and deliver curriculum, like at least it was for me in my first, 5-6 years of teaching. It's a lot of work. So, when I think of this remote learning context, similarly, like the structures will be put in place for remote learning. A lot of decision-making around curriculum is at the school level, teacher, which I think makes sense. But in terms of a potential support for some of these schools and teachers around content and courses, so that, they don't have to focus on the development of content courses and the execution of it, which is going to be huge. So I'm just wondering if, again, and I'm not pushing for these models, to be clear, because I don't, but if you all have thoughts around that specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So both in terms of platforms and what DESE has offered, we're going to be researching all of those options. We're going to be working very closely with our partners right now who currently engage with us in terms of professional development. They are at the ready to work with us to ensure that teachers have both the content and the skill piece of this remote, if that's what happens, so that they can feel confident in delivering the actual content, right? So we have our science partner, we have our data folks, everybody's at the ready. They're ready to go. They're like, tell us when. We have our restorative justice people. So we have everyone ready to be able to support some of the professional development that the teachers will need in order to have a more robust remote learning experience deliver for the students.
No, thank you. And I keep pushing on the remote learning plan, not to suggest that, I'm advocating for remote learning, but just the reality is that even in a hybrid model, you need to have a remote learning plan. So, that's the piece where it's really, even if we choose hybrid, you have two plans, like you have to, continue to design for. Okay. I think I have a few other questions there, oh, well, maybe picking up, and I think that the mayor was asking about this, and I just want to be clear. So, as you're currently thinking about, let's say, the 1st through 8th grade model, we divide up into cohorts A and B. We have a teacher working with, A, and then with B, 4 days a week, and then remote in the middle. Is the idea that, let's say for cohort A, when they're doing remote learning those 3 days of the week, is that going to be synchronous? And if so, like, who's delivering that if the teacher is working in person with the group of students that are in the building at the time?
Yeah, I'm going to have Kinnan jump in.
It's going to be a mix of synchronous and asynchronous. Per DESE guidance, the remote learning days have to mirror the in-person learning days. So we're envisioning morning meeting, and in terms of who's going to be working with those remote students who are remote on those days, as you know, our schools are autonomous, right? So what you see here is kind of like our guidance. I imagine it will vary by school. So at your elementary schools, you might have a paraprofessional that's teamed with a homeroom teacher that's doing some work. You'll also see that students' enrichment, intervention, ESL services, maybe some of their teletherapy is happening on those days for students with disabilities. So it's a blend of synchronous and asynchronous.
Great, thank you. But just to underscore that, again, because I think one of the misconceptions, maybe that I hold only, but maybe others, is that, again, this question of like, if you're a teacher and you're teaching your class, how are you also doing, remote learning? But I guess what I'm hearing is that per the school plan, like it's really a school level decision, and they have other adults, other, teaching and learning staff that'll be participating. So it's not just the teacher that has to be responsible, but, as you said, paras, related service providers, and others as well.
Right, and I think it goes back to 2 points you made before. One is that the survey data that we're gathering in the next few weeks is critically important, because schools need to know how many students and teachers they will have available. So again, that will vary by school. There could be a case where a school can have a dedicated remote learning teacher at each grade level, and then the other teachers take the other cohorts of the homerooms, right? And then I also think, to your second point, it's the importance of a learning management system, regardless of if we're talking about the remote learning component of the hybrid model or the full remote learning model. That will be absolutely necessary to ensure that students are still accessing core content, and that those remote learning days really do mirror the in-person days. And I think one thing we did to enable that was to shorten kind of and concentrate the day with the district-wide enrichment camps at the end of the day.
Great. And the district is planning on using Google Classroom, is that right? I think I read that as one of the main LMSs, or the main?
Yeah, that's correct. Mainly for our elementary,
Okay.
secondary students. Our early childhood teachers
Yep.
found that like Padlet was a
Yeah,
better kind of place. Padlet, as it's written right now, our hybrid model, there's actually no remote learning component
Right.
requirement for pre-K and K, and that was based on a lot of feedback we heard from teachers, families, that remote learning for our youngest learners was the most difficult. But yes, overwhelmingly, Google will be one of the main suites that we use. But as Cynthia mentioned, we're
Yeah.
also looking into FLVS
Right,
and Edgenuity. We have some schools that have used Edgenuity in the past, so we have some experience with that.
Okay, that's actually answers my question. So there's still some flexibility opportunity for schools to decide. Okay, that's helpful. Okay. For Clever, just to make sure I understand that platform, which I think is good news, is that one of the things we talked about in the spring is that there are multiple logins for different systems that students were using, and it made data collection really, really difficult because you have access to some and not others. If I'm understanding Clever, that's a platform where you do one login, and then, if I'm a family member, I go through this Clever platform, and then I access all of the different online resources that the district is providing, and I don't have to add like a separate, login and things like that. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's a single sign-on, so you log into Clever and you see your Imagine Learning, you
Yep.
see your Google Classroom. Now, the challenge in the spring was that not all students were using Clever to sign into Google Classroom. At the high school, they've worked really hard to make sure students can just log directly into Google Classroom because it was utilized heavily
it.
before we went remote. But yes, Clever's a
see.
single sign-on platform.
Okay. And then for the little ones, pre-K and K, so, you know, I like this idea of daily interaction, couple hours and, you know, 2.5 hours. I know they're not required to do anything else beyond that, but are they going to be given the opportunity through Khan Academy? I mean, I have a rising kindergartner, so I know all the apps that, you know, she was using, continues to use. So just what's the thinking there, that even though it's not required, or maybe it is, or like, just what's available to those kids?
Sure, yeah, it's not required because it meets the time on learning for kindergarten, but we have already been in conversations about enrichment activities similar to district-wide enrichment camps, sending students home. They have access to Clever or Padlet, so absolutely encouraged, but the only point is that there's no requirement to take attendance during remote learning, but we will absolutely be providing families with activities, Camp Con, and many other, you know, content-related packets,
Yep.
work at home for that time when they're not in school.
And if I'm clear, the only exception, if a student has an IEP and gets, sort of has additional services, may they get those out of outside of that block of time, or is that going to all be delivered within that block of time?
For pre-K and K, it's all delivered in the
Okay.
session that they're in.
Got it. Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Okay, so let's go to custodians, because obviously a tremendous part of this plan hinges on our ability as a district to be able to ensure to the highest degree possible just the safety of our staff, students. I mean, that's the top priority. And a lot of the plan is built on cleaning, you know, having access to materials, just everything. And I know the plan talks about shifting earlier the afternoon shift to or the late shift to an afternoon shift, and then maybe creating it sounds like very complicated. It sounds like it's going to be expensive, which for me is not the challenge. So I guess I'd love to understand what is the current thinking, and do we feel like we're going to have enough capacity, you know, with the current number of custodians, resources, and maybe similar to the question earlier, like, is there an ask here? Because this feels like such a critical part of can we open school or not, that I'd love to just hear a little more directly.
Sure. Hello? Okay. So as far as custodial staff, we have 20 facilities. A school like this will take, for example, since we're here, there's 2 custodians during the day, 4 at night. What we're looking to do is bring our second shift that would work normally 2 to 10, 11 to 7. Or 10 to 6, and then give them a few hours overtime. So there is a cost, of course. The custodial staff's well aware of this, and looking forward, we're getting some training for them. Hazmat training. The union's working with us on many trainings within the next 2 weeks. We also have a lot of PPE. We have disinfectants. We also are doing fogging with the hydrochloric acid. So, for instance, we have 2 schools right now where we have a latchkey program. Tuesdays and Thursdays, after the students leave, we fog the facilities. So we're looking at that also in all of our schools. We have enough chemical and machines to do that within our whole district. Like mentioned, lunch will be in the classroom, so there'll be many challenges of getting the trash out down the stairs in older buildings with no elevators. So food service staff will work in conjunction with us, and it'll be a team effort. A small example on your little tables here, we have spray bottles. We're going to put spray bottles and disinfectant in every classroom. Like I said, hopefully a team effort in disinfecting. We plan on having our staff during the day to go around doing high-touch areas, light switches, elevators, railings, doorknobs, door handles, crash bars. We're going to patrol our bathrooms more, so what's said, like, we'll bring our staff in at 10 and continue with more bathroom patrols and cleanliness of our bathrooms. So we're ready for the challenges. Every day we think of different things. The team has been very supportive and financially with the CARES Act money. We've been being able to buy some equipment and chemical, so we're working on everything and things are coming in.
Great, thank you. And good segue to my next question is around just the budget implications, Superintendent. If you could just maybe share with us, just in terms of, I think, as we were meeting for one of the last times in person, we were talking about our budget, and there's all this uncertainty around Chapter 70 funding and things like that. Maybe just give a quick update on where are we as a district, and to this point around what access to funding do we have to be able to make sure that the materials that we need to even think about doing this hybrid model, that we are actually able to purchase them, and given the budget questions that we had earlier in the summer.
Yeah, I'll have Masir jump in, give us an overview of the Chapter 70, but you should know that we are in good shape in terms of ordering, as Merlino mentioned, with our CARES Act funding and funding that we have. So go ahead, Masir, jump in.
Sure, I just want to repeat the question just to make sure I heard it correctly. And you're just wondering how we're managing our expenses with the Chapter 70 announcement that was given last Thursday?
Yes, but if you wouldn't mind even saying what was the Chapter 70 announcement, and just, at a high level, like what's the state of the budget?
Sure thing. So we were given a number of 207 million as Chapter 78. So I did some preliminary calculations that I'm still waiting for verification from Mark, but my preliminary calculation has us at having a budget of 201 million approximately. And so it puts us in a good place. We've been ordering all summer. Nancy and Chris have been ordering their PPE all summer, and we've been allowing orders to be placed as necessary, placing obviously priority on PPE and the necessary materials to be able to open school.
Great. And then I think Chris mentioned this, that we've had access to CARES Act funding as well, right? That we
Correct.
continue to be able to, roughly, do you have a sense about how much CARES funding we've had access to?
Sure. So we will be receiving approximately $6.3 million in CARES Act funding. We do have to do equitable services for it. So there is approximately about 550,000 that has to be distributed to the private schools. So that leaves us with about $5.8 million to use from the CARES Act.
Great. Great, but that's better news, I think, than what we were contemplating several months ago, where we didn't know where Chapter 70 was coming in, and it sounds like, it came in, with a baseline increase from FY20, which is helpful. So, all right, well, and again, the main takeaway I'm sort of having from here is that with that budget, with CARES Act funding, we're able to purchase and have already started purchasing all the materials we need to ensure just that we're cleaning and, following everything that's in the plan. So that's good news. I just want to maybe reiterate one point that I think Julio was making earlier. And that's just this notion that, we're going to eventually next week approve a plan. We'll submit that plan per the requirements of DESE. Even if whatever we choose, I think, just to be clear, we're going to still have to make decisions in an ongoing basis based on what we're seeing in our district, based on emerging data. And so just to be clear, if we vote for a hybrid model next week, and then as we continue to watch closely just trends in our school, there's a scenario, and we should be prepared for a scenario where we may have to come back quickly and say, actually, we're going to hybrid now, just based on where the data is. And so just to be very clear that, we're going to vote on something, but it's fully, I think, expected that we're going to have to revisit this frequently and make sure that it's still serving the needs of our students, our staff, our families, and also within just the health guidance. And Superintendent, you were talking about why it's just so critical that we always continue to work so closely with the city, because, as we think about, assessing public health, that really is not just a school department, but something that happens in close partnership with the city. So we'll just have to be mindful that with all of this, we're making the best decision given the information we know and have right now, but that we retain the right and responsibility to have to then reevaluate and, and continue to make decisions in the best interest of our district. Okay, I will pause there. I think I have other things, but I'll pause there. I will go one more sort of round, so back to Jess. If there are other questions.
Okay, thank you, because I do have some other questions. So, and a lot of it is just clarifications. So, one thing I just want to clarify is that what we're saying is a likely scenario is that given the family preference, like putting aside for now the question of the talks we have to have with the teachers and the teachers union, right? But given family preference, it might be true that roughly half of our students won't come to school even under the hybrid model, right? So just to use the Leahy as an example, if we have 500 students there, it's not that we're going to have 250 students on Monday and Tuesday and 250 on Thursday and Friday. It's going to be more like 125 on Monday and Tuesday and 125 on Thursday and Friday. Am I?
That's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
And the balance in a different cohort.
Correct.
Right. So, and I guess it was somewhat answered. I think Ventura was getting at some of this, but so it's 8 to 1, right? When they're in person. And so I'm assuming that the other time in the teacher's workday is spent designing or recording or delivering the remote content, right? And I did want to ask a clarifying question because I'm not sure what I understand what we mean by synchronous or asynchronous. So does synchronous mean that, like let's say I'm teaching math to the students who are in school, and I'm in person teaching math to the 10 or 11 students who are in my classroom that day. Does that mean that there are other students who are on Zoom on a screen in that classroom getting the same instruction at the same time? Is that what synchronous means? Or what does synchronous versus asynchronous mean?
That's one example of synchronous learning. That's a flipped classroom model when remote students are actually being zoomed in. But synchronous simply means online with a teacher. So it could be a Zoom is
Okay.
synchronous learning when you're doing independent work and you're not signed in to a platform, a video or audio conferencing platform with a teacher. That's asynchronous learning. That's work that you're doing on your own, for example, through Google Classroom.
Okay.
So what you said is just one example of what synchronous learning is, yes.
So it could be true that while Group A is in the classroom, right, they might either have some of their other students on a screen with them, or those students at the same time are getting similar content, but from a different teacher or pre-recorded or some other model in that way. Okay, that all of those are on the table. Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Another question I had is that, and this might have been on a school-by-school decision basis, but I do know in the spring there were like a certain number of the Zoom episode, or not episodes, but, sort of sessions, that's the word I need, were, like understood by the children as required, and then there were other things that were sort of presented as optional, and I'll be transparent about my agenda here. Like, I'm hoping that the optional option goes down to 0, because I feel like when things are presented as optional, the kids are much less likely to do them, and so are we?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because families, everyone needs to understand that we were in emergency remote learning. And what's going to happen this fall, whether it's the remote learning component of the hybrid or the full remote learning, is going to look absolutely different. Attendance being taken, student participation requirements, everything being graded. It is going to mirror in-person learning per DESI guidance. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and we're absolutely in agreement with you.
Okay, great. And then two more questions or points. One question, one point. So one thing that I also think would be helpful and that I would encourage all the schools in central office to think about is a kind of regular or consistent way to provide feedback to families and to parents on how their kid is doing. And again, I'm sorry to use my experience as a model. I'm just sort of, putting that out there as what gives rise to the question. But if my child was self-managing a lot and I was monitoring and hopefully seeing that he's engaged, but I feel like it would have been helpful to get a little report every week on a more consistent basis, right? About this is how engaged Eli was in math class this week, or this is, what he needs to focus on, or I know that it would just be helpful because otherwise I don't even know, he tells me that he's doing the work, and when I would email a teacher or write to them on Class Dojo and say, how's it going, I would get, people were responsive, but I didn't have a way of knowing that he was consistently doing high quality work on an assignment. Do you
Absolutely,
understand what I'm
yes.
saying?
And
Yeah.
part of the DESI guidance is around feedback to students that has to be a part. And I think Superintendent said it earlier, in terms of beefing up the full remote plan, that's another component. Is there a weekly log? There has to be some type of district-wide. Many of our schools did have something similar to what you're describing during the emergency remote learning period. But that's something that would have to be district-wide, absolutely.
Okay. And then just my one last question is, could you guys just give us a couple of examples of what kind of support teachers are getting to upskill in the remote learning delivery and so on? Is that all coming, is it DESI resources that you guys are, and DESI trainers that are providing that, or are there private contractors that we're working with? How are we helping and supporting the teachers to do this?
Yeah, so kind of the skeleton structure of the first 10 days is on pages 39 and 40 of the plan. We have a version of that that's more fleshed out. It's a mix. It's a mix of in-district providers. Speaking from the ESL world, many of our sessions are going to be sharing networking sessions. We have a lot of experts in district, so it's going to be a mix of teachers sharing what they did, what worked, what their thoughts are, being able to collaborate across the district, along with, as Cynthia mentioned, outside providers. So all of our major curricular resources that are shared across schools, we'll be bringing in those. We also have a lot of professional development planned for job-alike groups, so related service providers, psychologists, BCBAs, ETFs, ESL teachers. So we have external experts coming in also.
Okay.
And then there will be your usual, we'll have our COVID response leader presenting, we'll have human resources, kind of to focus on all of the logistical components of reopening school.
And then one last comment, and that is just that I know that many of our families are going to be affected. This is a place to me where family engagement becomes even more important, right? Because so many families are struggling economically as a result of this. They might have housing issues after the eviction moratorium ends unless it gets extended. And so I just want to put in a plug for a lot of coordination with the Family Resource Center and with community partners, because the necessity of checking in with families and making sure that they're getting other supports to make sure that they're as stable as they can be during this time is, I think, going to assume even more importance during this era.
Great.
I'm done, sorry, thanks.
That was, appreciate it. Noemi?
Sorry, the only question that I have is, I know that you guys are going to have a feedback forum. I'm looking at the numbers from what you presented there. If you look at the remote learning, only 11% says that they will not choose that option, compared to the hybrid model where it says that 36% will not work for them. So just based on those numbers, it seems that it could be that the preferred modality is remote learning. So when you go back and do this additional forum, would the recommendation be based on what the majority of the parents and teachers and staff are recommending, or on what you think would be the best? Because I could see, for example, if all the parents said that they want, and staff said, we want remote, would that what you guys would be moving forward, or would you also be looking at other parameters in order to bring a format for us?
Yeah, we will share with you the additional feedback that we receive in the upcoming forums and any other data via surveys that we get. And ultimately, I think it's a decision that we have to make together based on needs of our students, families, staff, and overall health data, right? So I think those are all the variables that we have to consider when making a decision.
Okay, thank you.
Pat?
Okay, again, I'm going to apologize if I repeat a question that's already been asked, but the audio is really bad. I want to ask the superintendent, if we look at the elementary, the cohorts, I understand A and B with the 6 days between in-school instruction, but I'm wondering about cohort D. If I'm assigned to Mrs. Jones's class and I opt for the remote learning, who is doing the instruction for cohort D while Mrs. Jones is doing A and B?
Yeah, good question. So again, I think this is why it's important for us to get additional data points from staff member and families with respect to choices that they're going to be making in the upcoming weeks. For us to be able to determine how many teachers are opting for, how many teachers will be doing the remote versus the in-person, and how many students have chosen that option. So until we have additional data, that scenario it's hard to answer that question, Pat.
Ideally, even if you have 3 students, let's say, that opt for that option D, or to become cohort D, those kids probably will not know their homeroom teacher. Correct?
I'm thinking about that.
I think
Because
back to,
teacher's doing A and B, so it's impossible for her to do D.
you're right that the teacher who's teaching A and B would not do D. I think there are 2 important points. One, just to say again what the superintendent said, we can't fully plan for what cohort D will look like until we have the staff and family results of which families, at what grade levels, at what schools are opting into full remote. I think the second important point is that even if a family opts their student into cohort D, they still have a seat at their neighborhood school in the hybrid model. So if a family recognizes or thinks that it's not working for them, they would go back into the hybrid model.
Again, and I understand what you're saying. It's difficult to plan right now because the forms for selection aren't coming out until the 7th, and I understand that. But it just brings me to the point that we need some normalcy to this thing. The hybrid model is not a normal school day for the kids. It really isn't when you think about it. And I go back to the possibility of teachers teaching remotely from their own classroom with their own materials in front of them, with their whole class in front of them, it's a more real situation. And I just think a better situation for the kids, just for normalcy and trying to get them back to what school really is. With that, I'll pass it along. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Mayor Rivera?
Thank you. Is there a likelihood in remote that there would be some percentage of remote that's not live? And what would that percentage be?
That's the asynchronous learning.
That's right.
So yes, as for.
Why y'all gotta use asynchronous? Why can't you say that?
That's what they told us to use.
So, right.
Somebody on Facebook was like, those people are making decisions, they don't know what synchronous and asynchronous mean. I hear you, but they could just say live and not live, let's be clear.
True.
To be clear, they are synchronous, just, I'm saying.
I don't got a PhD, I'm sorry. So what percentage of that is that gonna be like my kid looking at a video? I think
Going
you
to be a
turned
blend and definitely based on grade band. And that's where we have to work collaboratively with teachers and families to flush out the remote learning plan more. Will a 9-year-old who opts into full remote learning be on a screen from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m.? No. So it's going to be a blend of live and not live. And I think we have to work collaboratively.
Yeah, so as an example, a high schooler, right? You may get 2 hours of instruction with the teacher in front of you in the Zoom, and then you have independent work. So that's the asynchronous and synchronous combination right there. So it really is developmentally, and we don't know until we've got more data and choice making from families and staff.
So, again, y'all should stop using that word, because it's very confusing. That's a real comment. And then the DESE, I had a conversation with the mayors and the DESE commissioner, and we asked specifically about this remote attendance. They are going to, at least what the commissioner told us on the call, with the secretary of education as well was on it, that they're going to be very rigorous with remote attendance.
So will we.
And so that if in some place we fail by mistake or something happens, DESE is going to say that stuff doesn't count. They have to do it this way. They're going to do programs with you guys and all this other stuff. So I think that, and then they're going to report. Now, I stuck him because he said, well, right now we report after every year. And I told him that's not going to be good enough. We have to do like a monthly report. And that's a little goosey-goosey. I mean, we should do every 2 weeks, but a monthly report, how many kids showed up, how many kids didn't show up. It's very clear. There's a dashboard that everybody can see, and it's the same one every time. And so I think that that's going to be different than what we're seeing today. I didn't ask this question before, and it's just, it's a simple, is every school going to have a quarantine facility? Like a place to put kids who got sick on that day or come to school sick?
So we call it, what do we, Amber?
Dismissal room.
Okay. And everyone will have one?
Yes.
For students and for teachers? Or there's going to be two different types? Okay. And I think that there's going to be a lot of conversation about the 100% remote. And I think that what you're going to find is that districts that can do 100% remote without very big lifts may do that. And I know that Somerville made a decision to do 100% remote. So they have 5,600 students in that district, from K through 12. That's almost the size of our high school. Also, if you're in Somerville, I think you have a different per capita income, access to different things. And so I say that not because I want to throw shade at Somerville. I just want to be clear about when I say we don't have perfect infrastructure, none of the infrastructure that we're dealing with is perfect. And so I think the best that we can do, the best we can do for these kids is to work it out in a way that meets all the needs that schools provide for students, and they're not just teaching and learning. unfortunately, in our community, it's more than just teaching and learning. The last thing I'll say is that, you know, I want to remind folks that are watching this or thinking about, or talking about this, that Jessica said, you know, I don't want to use my experience as this thing all the time. The important thing you should know is that you have people on this panel that have that experience. Her kids in school, our schools. I have kids. Superintendent's kids, I think they're in public school.
They are.
I don't know about, I don't know about Dr. Custodio Laura, but definitely Julia, kids grew up in this city. So we have people on this committee that are talking about this from a perspective that's not just, you know, how we run the schools. It's how we run the schools for our kids. And I think it's important to know, and I hope that Jessica doesn't stop doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just before I go to Julio, I mean, I just want to underscore, Mayor, I mean, there's a lot there, but one of the things you said that I'm taking, just the language. You know, again, synchronous, it's in the guidance, but we got to make sure that we're presenting information in ways that is just accessible to all our families and so forth. So I don't want to lose that point. I think that's a really important point. Julio?
Thank you. I don't have any questions or any comments except on the transportation issue that was discussed earlier in terms of the, that the children would be on a bus with a driver. And did I catch it right that there will not be a monitor on the school bus?
Currently, we do not have monitors on all buses. Moving forward with this new plan, we will be employing monitors on all transportation buses.
So we will be employing them?
Correct.
Oh, it was my understanding that they would be just with the drivers when the discussion of the food was brought before us before. So
Yep,
they will
there'll
be
be
a monitor
monitors
and a
on-
driver
Exactly.
with the number of children that will be. All right, thank you.
You're
That
welcome.
was my question.
Okay, and I have no additional questions at this time, so.
Actually, can I just, I think we're gonna vote on this next week, and I made some statements, and I think we should all think about things that aren't in this plan that would make us vote for a plan, and what that would be, and so the district knows that. And for me, you know, what testing might be like in this plan, I don't see much of it in there, so I wanna make sure that if something in this speaks about how we might do testing and why we might not do it. A budget, and a little bit more information about outdoor facilities.
Great. I'll leave it open just for, you know, another opportunity. Any last minute questions or thoughts or anything? Okay, so as a reminder, we'll be meeting next Wednesday to discuss the plan, get more information, and then we will be taking a vote on the plan. The plan is technically due to the department on the 10th of August, but we've gotten an extension because our meeting is not happening till the 12th, so that's been approved. So
Are we doing that in person again, and what time?
the meeting is scheduled for 6:30, I believe. It's our
Okay.
regular scheduled meeting, correct? I'm looking at John. I can't really, is it 6?
6, yeah, is what I have in my.
6 o'clock, sorry. So yeah, we'll confirm that with everyone, but it's 6 o'clock.
Are we gonna do it in person, or are we gonna do it on?
I'd actually love to hear thoughts. I mean, I think, you know, again, we've tried this for the first time, and I don't know any other board that's meeting like this. I think it was important for us to do that. I'd be open to some thoughts from board members around, again, the in-person versus the Zoom.
I think it has to be in person.
If we
I'm
go in
agnostic.
person, I
happy to
believe the
be-
sound needs to be improved because I really haven't been able to grasp much of what anyone has said tonight.
We'll have to send IT.
Thanks, Pat. That's important feedback. And again, we knew going into this tonight that we were trying something that hasn't been tried before, so appreciate the feedback, and yeah, we'll improve. How about other board members?
I don't have a problem with the,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd say I'll confirm by the end of the week, but as of now, I'm hearing in person then for the meeting. Okay.
I mean, I have a couple of comments that are not, before we adjourn. I just think it's important to know, and I know other people were outside and stuff, so there could have been other people, but Enrique Matos is a member of the school board. The school committee is with us, and I just want to thank him for showing live and in person. I don't think it can go understated. I know we talked about it, but we got most of what we wanted for Chapter 70. So that budget scenario of the 10% cut, we didn't ever have to go there. And we're a stone throws away to the exact budget we would have had we gotten the Student Opportunity Act and you took that $5 million. We're like a stone throw away from there, and I think that we're going to be able to augment that. That's a huge deal that we know exactly how much. That means no teacher layoffs, and if you were watching the news, there was teachers layoffs in other communities. That means, you know, that we're really close to having exactly what we wanted to do, short of the SOA money, and I'm told that that's not 100% dead yet either. So I think it's important to reiterate the money to run the district is here, and if we have to, you know, pony up some more in the end to meet the last mile, we will definitely take it to the city council to try to do that, but my understanding is that there would be support there. And because of that, the superintendent did something very brave. And when we asked for the 10% cut, she found it, and it was in the matter of raises to freeze raises for the staff, and she came out with a document today or yesterday rescinding that. And so all the staff that were going to receive a freeze on their raises will actually receive the raises in this current budget season. That's not that's not a small thing. I want to make sure we talk about it. I took 10% from most of the departments, and I actually implemented it. So it's not, it didn't happen at the schools, and I just want to make sure we know that the money situation was not, it didn't end up being as dire as we thought. That's just for FY21. Who knows what's going to happen in FY22? But, you know, it might be a different place, 100% different place than we are today. I wanted to talk about those things about the money, because we did spend some time on it, and there was a lot of people upset about the 10% raise freeze, and we don't have to do that, and it's important to know.
Thank you, Mayor. Jess?
I have a question, and it's more almost like a point of order, but I feel this is not at all about reopening or anything, and I know we have immediate things we have to deal with, but I feel like I've raised a couple of points now, this question of reopening the conversation about having joint meetings with the school committee members and, you know, talking about, I know we need to re-engage around the turnaround plan and, you know, and that trajectory. And so I'd like to request that, you know, at some point this fall, that becomes a formal agenda item so that we can talk about that and open that conversation with the full school committee. Because I just think that that's important, especially in this crisis time, if we want to be planning long-term for a return to local control. I mean, I know almost all of us are local, but it's not the same thing as an elected board. And I do think that we need to be meeting together and deliberating together, even if the truth is that this group is the one that can vote right now, but I think that's important.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, we're actually not adjourning. I'm going to need to entertain a motion to go into executive session. We do have a couple of contracts.
Excuse me, Ventura.
Yep, Pat, sorry.
Just one thing, just to shift gears. This is Anne Marie Stronach's last meeting with the LAE board. She's going to be leaving the district, and I think it behooves us as a board to thank her for everything that she's done for us and the district for the past 27 years. So I'd like to send a shout out to Anne Marie.
Thanks, Pat.
That I'll get you later. Very gracious. It's been wonderful working with all of you. My time here has been incredible, and I take all my experiences and the wisdom that you've all taught me with me on my next adventure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So just to talk briefly about the executive session, how it's going to work. So I'm going to entertain a motion in a second here to go into executive session. Board members will remain, superintendent and her team, to present the information. Everyone else, we're going to ask to exit the room. We'll need Pat available on the Zoom, but we should not be broadcasting the executive session. And then we'll need to then vote to come out of executive session back to this session and then record the votes and then adjourn. So that's the way it's going to work.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Could I
Please.
offer a recommendation where we're just going to have Pat, could we call her in with the sound being bad? Because it might be a little bit more difficult in the next meeting. I think that would be appropriate so long as we announce it.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. We could even just Zoom her
Great
in
idea.
directly or, yeah,
That's a great idea.
yeah,
That way Pat can hear better.
yeah. Okay, so Pat, we'll follow up with you. We'll call you directly just for the executive session and then we'll put you back on for the meeting. So do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Do you have a second? Second. Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor, Jess?
Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Mayor Rivera?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we'll enter executive session as soon as we clear the room. We are now back in the public session, and I just like to report that we took 2 votes on contracts that were approved unanimously. So just like the minutes to reflect that. So hearing no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Okay, so roll call vote. Jess is now departed. Noemi? Pat? Yes. Mayor Rivera? Julia? And the chair votes yes, so we are now adjourned. Thank you.